Good morning. Hello, everyone. My name is Nassor AL-Hilal. I'm a grade 11 student at Dar es Salaam International Academy, and I come from an IB school, which is all about practicing and promoting open-mindedness in our lives. But 4 months ago, I was confronted with my own bias in my language and literature classroom. We were having a very normal class discussion on how language can be such a powerful tool that we use every day without realizing. And so on forth, the discussion came and fell upon toys. And my class teacher raised a question too. Why is it that toys have been categorized into different genders, labeling that boys should be playing with monster trucks and girls with Barbie dolls? I mean, if you do take the time to think about it, it does make sense, doesn't it? But well, without taking the time to think about the question, I impulsively stood up from my seat and stated that, well, it's because girls are feminine and soft, so probably that's why they play with dolls in the first place. But trust me, I'm ashamed for saying all this, but until that particular moment, I was so sure of what came out of me. Now, the next thing that happened was that all the girls stood up from their seats and literally ambushed me for being so stereotypical, of course. Even though I had not intended to offend anyone, yet I did. So it's honestly got me to thinking that who did say that girls were supposed to play with dolls in the first place? And if they chose to play with Hot Wheel cars, for example, would that make them any less female? But what honestly bothered me the most was that this information was not passed down to me directly, nor was it ever told to me, but yet it still existed. So now I'd like to raise a bigger question to you. That have you ever wondered or tried to question yourself, where do your beliefs and your opinions come from? I mean, we haven't really based ourselves on years of research for the knowledge that we claim to know of, but yet it's still there. Be it in a conversation, a class discussion, a debate, or simply just walking down a supermarket aisle going to pick out a new shampoo for your hair. We're all guilty to one tricky problem known as confirmation bias. This is when we allow ourselves to conform to our beliefs, and we tend to uphold the information that enhances them, but at the same time ignore anything that challenges them. So I'd like to take you through understanding what confirmation bias really is. And according to Britannica, confirmation bias is simply when a person chooses to favor information that only confirms to their existing beliefs, but at the same time ignore any sort of information that would challenge it. I remember in my late primary years, we had a new art teacher who joined school, and he was very talented at his work, where it was displayed all over the school. But I also remember my father once telling me that left-handed people were simply more creative in the field of art compared to right-handed people. And coincidentally, my art teacher was left-handed. This is no fact at all, but simply it hit to my mind as core evidence for the knowledge that was already in my favor. So simply moving on, challenging our biases can be an internal struggle because our brain has been formed to deny any sort of information that we do not believe in. Our brain can put ourselves through hours of research only to look for inaccurate information rather than try to find the undesirable truth. So instead of actually learning from our mistakes, we tend to look for sources which only enable them further. As you can see, if we go to Google and we search in for our biases, Google will deliver us with sources which conform to our biases. So instead of actually learning something new, we're being delivered with sources which only prove to our biases, enhancing them further, and we're not learning anything scientific. But we're moving on. So not to be a brag, but I remember that recently my father, he bought a new car. And as we drove around using it in town, stopping for the green light to turn on, a similar car of the same model pulled up next to us. And we awkwardly began to stare at each other until one of us had to wave politely. But well, as soon as the light turns green and we drove away, my mother, she spoke, and she stated that, well, now since we bought this car, watch everyone else in Dar es Salaam buy it too. But well, this was funny for me to hear, Because it's not that we bought the car that now everyone else is buying it, but it's because it was never relevant for us to notice it in the first place. So now here I have a demonstration of how our brain tries to function, well, without using any neurological sciences whatsoever. So simply let's say that the car belongs to box A. As you can see box A on the screen over there. Box A has always existed. It's always been there. But as we look into the color, probably it's been left unnoticed. But then my father, he goes in and he buys a product from box A. And now simply it lights up. It's noticeable because it holds a personal connection to us. And this is how we work, that when something holds no connection to us whatsoever, we tend not to associate ourselves with it. But it didn't end there. I also remember my little brother began to speak too. And he stated that he knows a particular boy in his school whose father drops him with the same car. So now moving on from material to personal connections, we're trying to look at the type of people who could possibly associate themselves with this car. So now it's moving beyond to just material. And coming to understand that this is simply how we even make friends, because we identify a person and we try to look in for their interest. And then we compare their interest with our interest. And if they align, we go further beyond to find more similarities. It could be religion, could be culture, could be faith, could be status, could be wealth. But beyond this, we don't realize that we have narrowed down our circle, that we have stopped ourselves from gaining new information, because we're not allowing our brains to be challenged. We're not allowing ourselves to meet new people. And are we allowing ourselves to think differently, because we're surrounded by the same people who do the same things, talk the same language, or even pray at the same church. So simply, just from the internet and from books, from what we believe in, and from the people who encourage us with the information that we know of, we're simply held in a small circle, not allowing ourselves to move beyond it. Well, how many of us use Facebook or Instagram? A show of hands, please. Well, today when you get home, I'd like you to go through your home feed or your explore section and look through the content that's been delivered to you and analyze it thoroughly. And I would like you to also take the time to look into someone else's device. Well, of course, without invading their privacy. I want you to notice one thing, that your information that will be delivered to you and the person next to you will never be the same. It's because social media platforms have unconsciously listed down your interests. They're allowing yourselves to see information, to see pictures, to see quotes that will only be of interest to you, only appealing to yourself, not allowing yourself to witness anything different, to witness anything new. So still, you remain in your own bubble, even through using your time on social media. But well, confirmation bias exists beyond my personal examples. It's even there in the real world, because today research has proven that doctors are as likely to fall into the trap of confirmation bias. Whenever you go see a doctor and you start explaining to them your symptoms, a doctor will have an initial hunch, and it could be malaria. Well, malaria is just an example, but of course, while you're explaining to the doctor that what you're going through, they will give you treatments, diagnosis, only to prove that you have malaria. But of course, this is a waste of time, because they're not allowing you to find alternative factors which could be just as likely what you're going through. And further research has stated that, according to Dr. Croskery, who's an expert at clinical decision-making, has concluded that 1 in 20 people in the United States are likely to fall under the false predictions of doctors. Scary, huh? But well, how can we be open-minded if all that we've managed to achieve in our lives is continuously feeding into our biases, feeding into our existing beliefs? Well, we have to start somewhere. And my advice to you and to everyone else out there is that the next time that we're actually confronted with our biases, or we probably hear someone say something that we don't believe in at all, instead of actually falling down in despair, let's take a step back and actually try to see where this person, or this individual is coming from. Because everything that has surrounded this person has affected their argument, and so has yours. So I'd like to end with a quote which says that what the human being is best at doing is interpreting all new information so that their prior conclusions remain intact. Thank you.